So there are plenty of ways people have used over the years to classify communities, and recently they've become national and international standards. We'll look at some of those. So just like we classify plants by their characteristics that help us decide which are related to which others, and more lately by DNA analysis, figuring these things out, or soils, we classify them based on their origins and similarities. Plant communities are classified based on how the vegetation looks, its physiognomy, and also which groups of plants are associated. That's probably the more common way. From our textbook, we can see this table, an example of a North American plant community and how it's classified. Starting with how it looks, those physiognomic things come first, and then later in the finer categories are broken down by the actual species that are there. So woodlands are something that looks like a place full of trees, and then further classified into, in this case, a woodland dominated by evergreens or gymnosperms. Evergreen coniferous forest woodlands with rounded crowns is the formation, and the main association, juniperus, the juniper, and artemisia, a shrubby aromatic bush. Plant ecologists study communities by going out in them, collecting data on presence and absence and abundance of different species. And then you can compare communities in a number of ways. One is cluster analysis, where characteristics of the plants or communities, depending on the kind of thing you're clustering, are put together. The more similar things end up closer to each other. And if you're comparing communities, the community coefficient, or CC, is a measure of similarity between any two stands. You can make a visual representation of this using twin span or other techniques, but twin span stands for two-way indicator species analysis, in which the diagram is built from the bottom up, from what species are present and then other characteristics. In this illustration, here's a picture of some piney woodlands, and in the diagram or graph at the right are 63 different stands of this woodland classified on two variables, moisture of the forest and the elevation of the site. And you can see ones that are closer to each other are more similar, like in the lower left-hand corner, 13 and 14 and 12, than ones that are farther apart, those ones, let's say, versus 62 or 63 in the upper right. So this picture will probably look to you like a cladogram, how we look at relationships of different species based on either morphological characteristics or genes. And the ones closest to each other sharing a branch, especially close to the end, like these, are more closely related than, let's say, this one and this one. And these data are from those same stands portrayed in the last figure. In the last 20 years or so, people have been using remote techniques to view plant communities that are hard to reach, or maybe to do comparisons over a very large spatial scale. With remote sensing, special equipment is used to record the spectral characteristics of the plants below, and you can see differences among different communities, and in some cases, dominant species. With remote sensing, vegetation maps can be drawn from pictures. Sometimes people use the actual pictures as maps. And maps can be highlighted to portray more closely floristic information using colors and symbols to portray more dramatically different communities. Now, you can sense things remotely, make a map, generalize, but always ground truthing is important in not only studying plants, but geology and other things as well. So this beautiful image is a remotely sensed vegetation in the mountains around San Cristobal de las Casas in Chiapas, the southern part of Mexico, and with colors detected in bands 3, 4, and 5. These are reflecting green, magenta, and infrared colors. And the color is correlated to the intensity of photosynthetic pigments. So that map can be color-coded using different colors to indicate different communities. You can see that the red color in this map is on the highest peaks of the mountain where there's cloud forest, and the light yellow at the bottom is where forest has been cleared for agriculture and pasture land. The gray is where there are buildings and no vegetation. So in ecology, I know you learned about different kinds of diversity, and remember that species richness is just the number of species present, but included in diversity is also a measure of evenness, and sometimes that's indicated by density, and there are different measures of diversity, Shannon Weiner and Simpson's index. So we can look at diversity on a number of scales. In one microhabitat that's homogeneous, we refer to that as point diversity. Alpha diversity is diversity within a single community. Gamma is over the landscape. And we've talked before about beta diversity, and that's how one community differs from another, or what is species turnover. But in plant ecology, people sometimes also look at epsilon diversity, including different landscapes over a broader geographic area, and delta diversity, which compares different geographic regions, looking at the difference in species. Usually that's very great. Also in recent years, people have compared communities looking at associations among species. In my own field of plant-animal interactions, we use nestedness, but you can do it just based on which plants are present with other plants, different species with each other. If communities are subsets of larger communities, it's said that this landscape or set of communities is more organized. They're nested within each other. Here are a few figures also from this is from our book, I can't remember, it might be from a paper by Bascompt and colleagues, showing on the y-axis plant species. It's more like a table than a graph here. On the x, animals, and if there's a box where one plant and animal meet, that means they interact. So you can see on the left, that is a nested situation of communities, whereas on the right in B, things are not so orderly. And on the bottom is more what you might expect in reality. So there's a lot to be learned by documenting associations, either of plants with other plants or plants with animals, to get insight into the robustness of the community with respect to disappearance of species on one side of the interaction or the other. So in this little picture from our book are two examples of nested landscapes. You can see in this one how these are nested within the bigger picture. And here, although it's not all in the upper left-hand corner, we still have some nestedness.